This video is brought to you by HonorFirst.com, a nonprofit organization. I'm Clifford Gill, a retired Border Patrol Assistant Chief and one of its officers. For many years, Border Patrol folklore has claimed that Camp Chigas still exists and that it is in Mexico. Most Border Patrol agents have heard the story. Some were told the camp was lost during the Chamizal land settlement. Others swear they've seen the building. Because the story sounded plausible and was repeated often, it became accepted, but folklore is not history. This story has four parts: where the name Camp Chigas came from, what and where was Cordova Island, where Camp Chigas was actually located and where it would be today, and why there really is a former Border Patrol building in Mexico. Just not that one. When the search for Camp Chigas began, the origin of the name was not yet known. What was known was geography. An early Army or Border Patrol camp near an El Paso, later boundary changes, and long-standing rumors naturally pointed attention toward Cordova Island. That made it the most logical place to start. But the name Camp Chigas did not come from the Border Patrol. It came from the U.S. Army. On June 15, 1919, U.S. Army forces were engaged in cross-border fighting near Juarez, Mexico. Among them was Sergeant Peter Chigas, Troop L, 7th Cavalry. The El Paso Times reported that Sergeant Chigas was shot through the lung while standing in the Rio Grande. He was evacuated to the Fort Bliss Base Hospital, where he later died from his wounds on June 18, 1919. He was 25 years old. On December 26, 1919, the El Paso Herald reported that the War Department, under Secretary of War Newton D. Baker, formally named two El Paso border army camps in honor of soldiers killed in that fighting. The camp at the Santa Fe Street Bridge was officially named Camp Chigas in honor of Sergeant Peter Chigas. A second camp was named Camp Tusco after Private Samuel Tusco of the 82nd Field Artillery, who was killed on June 15th. Only after the origin of the name was uncovered did the Santa Fe Street location emerge as the key reference point. Until that connection was known, there was no obvious reason to look there first. Camp Chigas was not a nickname or a Border Patrol tradition. It was an official War Department designation created to honor a soldier who died of wounds received in combat. Understanding Cordova Island remains essential, not because Camp Chigas was located there, but because it explains why enforcement activity concentrated there and why the search naturally began in that area. The U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso was defined in 1848 by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which established the Rio Grande as the boundary. Later agreements clarified how the boundary would respond as the river changed. When changes were gradual, the border moved with the river. When changes were sudden, the border stayed where the river used to be. By the late 1890s, the Rio Grande formed a large looping bend that created a peninsula of Mexican territory extending northward into the United States. In 1899, engineers from the United States and Mexico cut a new channel across the base of that loop to reduce flooding. The river shifted into the new channel, but because the change was sudden, the legal international boundary remained in the old riverbed. The land inside that abandoned loop remained Mexican territory and became known as Cordova Island. Operationally, Cordova Island was a peninsula of Mexico extending into the United States. It could be accessed from Mexico from short, uncontested river crossings and had numerous exit points. This made it a hotbed of activity, especially during Prohibition, when alcohol smuggling flourished. For early Border Patrol inspectors, the title agent would not be adopted until the 1970s. The area was extremely difficult to control. Given that Camp Chigas was located about 1 mile away, it was reasonable that early attention focused on Cordova Island. Camp Chigas was located about 150 yards north of the river near the Santa Fe Street Bridge on the U.S. side of the boundary, about 1 mile west of Cordova Island. As the Army moved on, the Immigration Border Patrol took over the site. Camp Chigas served as the El Paso Subdistrict headquarters, a Border Patrol station, and later as the first national Border Patrol training location. The long-running boundary dispute was resolved by the Chamizal Convention, signed on August 29, 1963, and implemented in the mid-1960s. Rather than simply shifting land in one direction, the settlement redistributed territory on both sides of the former river channel and placed the Rio Grande into a fixed concrete-lined course. As a result, some areas that had once been Mexican became part of the United States, while other areas became part of Mexico. Cordova Island, which had existed because of the river's earlier behavior, was erased. The border that people see today is the outcome of that negotiated exchange. Seeing Mexican territory north of the modern river reinforced the belief that Camp Chigas must have crossed the border as well. Over time, that belief became Border Patrol folklore. You're currently looking at an image of a 1955 aerial photograph that is superimposed onto a 2014 aerial photograph. The current border with Mexico is the red line, and the building circled in green is Camp Chigas, which, if still standing, would be in the United States. The image in the screen now shows aerial photographs of the location of Camp Chigas through the years. It's clear the building was demolished by 1967, but that the location is still within the United States. But there is a former Border Patrol building that stands in Mexico, just not Camp Chigas. That building was the second El Paso Subdistrict headquarters, completed in 1956 at 1401 South Hammett Boulevard. After the boundary realignment, it ended up on the Mexican side of the line. It remains standing today and is still in use by the Mexican International Boundary and Water Commission. This final photo is the building in modern times. Two different buildings, two different locations, two very different histories. Camp Chigas matters because it connects the U.S. Army, early border violence, fallen soldiers, and the formative years of the Border Patrol. Understanding where it was, why it was named, and how treaties reshaped the landscape is not about correcting a rumor. It's about preserving institutional memory and telling Border Patrol history accurately. Camp Chigas was not lost to Mexico. Its name came from a soldier who died in combat. Its location can be proven with maps and documents, and its story deserves to be told clearly. HonorFirst.com gratefully acknowledges the Border Patrol Museum and historian Joseph Banco. Their historical materials continue to enrich our shared commitment to preserving the proud legacy of the United States Border Patrol.